الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع نهجهم إلى يوم الدين. Afterwards, inshallah, we are going to proceed with our discussion related to the Hadith Terminology. So, if we can remember, we are still discussing in the classification of Al-Ahad. That is Hadith Al-Ahad. We know that the Al-Khabar, a narration can be classified broadly into two categories. There is a kind of viral narration and the one that is not viral. So the one that is not viral can be subclassified into two major classes. One is based on the way that it arrived to us, and second is the classification based on the merit. So we discuss about those kind of classes that are related to the لغيره. Like for example, المشهور, العزيز, الغريب. So we started to discuss about the second category of Al-Ahad. That is a kind of unimorphic narration. You know, as I discussed previously, there is a kind of polymorphic narration and unimorphic narration. So a kind of unimorphic narration or unimorphic narration is a kind of narration that it is not viral. It is not narrated by so many narrators. But based on that, it can be classified into two. Based on merit and based on the challenge. So based on the merit, we discuss about there is as-sahih lizati, the one that is authentic. In normality, narration is authentic. And the one that the kind of narration that is authentic due to another reason, due to another narration. The third category is al-Hassan lizati, the narration that is satisfactory in its normality. It will be the recommendation to be considered as al-Hassan, a satisfactory narration. And there is al-Hassan laghirehi, a satisfactory narration due to other narration. And there is الضعيف, the one that is flimsy, a weak narration. So these are the point of our discussion. We discussed about al-mashhur, al-aziz, al-gharib. We mentioned that al-mashhur is a kind of narration of which the narration comes by the narration of three or more narrators. Al-aziz is a kind of famous narration. Al-mashhur means popular narration. Popular narration, three and above, three individuals, three reporters to above. And Al-Aziz is a kind of famous narration. Famous means that two individuals narrated that kind of narration. And we have Al-Gharib, which came from the narration of a single narration, like the hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. So we started to discuss about Al-Ahad باعتبار الرتبة. We have discussed about باعتبار الرتبة إلينا, which is المشهور العزيز الغريب. So باعتبار الرتبة المعنى باعتبار رتبته ينقسم إلى 5 أقسام. Based on the merit, it can be classified into 5 basic classes. One of the class is الصحيح, صحيح لذاته, and also صحيح لغيره. And we have الحسن لذاته, الحسن لغيره, and الضعيف. So we are going to continue from where we have stopped from الحسن لذاته, followed by الحسن لغيره, up to the position where we are able to reach within the time constraint, or within the time span. Inshallah, we are going to proceed. So we are going to proceed with al-Hasan lizatihi, a kind of narration that is satisfactory based upon that is R with normality. So الحسن لذاته. If we said الحسن لذاته ما رواه عدل خفيف الضبط, the kind of narration whereby the narrator in that kind of report يسير الضبط, he is less in the reputations. If you recall, we have mentioned that الصحيح لذاته هو ما رواه عدل تام الضبط وسلم من الشذوذ والعلة القاضية. هذا هو تعريف للصحيح لذاته. وتعريف للحسن لذاته هو كما ورد ما رواه عدل خفيف الضبط, is the one that the narrator who reported that is less in reputations. Meaning he is competent, but in terms of reputations, his reputations is lesser as compared to the report of an authentic person or authentic report. So, وسلم من الشذوذ, and it is also free from conjecture, والعلة القاضية, and a kind of hideous defect, a kind of deformative defect or indolence defect. So this is the basic definition of al-Hasan لذاته. The differences between al-Hasan لذاته والصحيح لذاته هو في محل الضبط. الصحيح لذاته بمعنى ما رواه عدل تام الضبط، والحسن لذاته ما رواه عدل خفيف الضبط أو ما رواه خفيف الضبط. هذا تعريفه. This is the definition. The definition of صحيح لذاته is that the kind of report whereby a person full of competency and full of reputation and a competent personality, that is what Sayyid Lizati. But as for Hasan Lizati is a kind of narration whereby the person who narrated that is competent, but he has lesser reputations as compared to the person that report authentic narration. So these are the basic differences. So وسلم من الشذوذ والعلة القاضية, and it is free from any conjecture and any kind of hideous defect. So this is the definition of al-Hasan lizati. So by this we will be able to understand the way to consider the narration. There will be a narration that the person who narrated that story, or who narrated that incident, or who narrated that hadith is a competent person full of reputations. And there is a kind of narration, the person who narrated that, he is a competent person, but he has some unconfirmed reputation, or his reputations are not completed ones. Maybe he may have some of the kind of weaknesses, in which you will see that some of the God have repelled him in other issues. Like for example, you will see a person of whom one of them God said, Sadukul la ba'sabi. But he is not termed as a thiqah, or thiqatun thiqatun thiqah, or a hujjah, or thiqatun lahu khatarun azim. Allah understand. So these are some of the classification of which we will discuss on these issues in the upcoming discussion, the upcoming sessions. So the basic definition of al-Hasan وما رواه عدل خفيف الضبط وسلم من الشذوذ والعلة القاضية. هذا هو التعريف. This is the definition. It is the one that the narrator is a competent person, but he has less reputations, where it is free from any conjecture and علة القاضية, a kind of hideous defect. So this is the definition. Let's proceed. So Sheikh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen rahimahullah continued to mention فليس بينه وبين الصحيح لذاته فرق سوى الاشتراط تمام الضبط. There is no any differences. There are no differences between صحيح لذاته and حسن لذاته سوى اشتراط تمام الضبط, except the condition of تمام الضبط, full of repetitions. So in the صحيح لذاته, the narrator has complete repetitions, but in الحسن لذاته, the narrator is having a kind of lesser repetitions as compared to the narrator with full repetitions. The Sahih Dula, which is in the Sahih, in authentic hadith, in authentic narration, than Al-Hasan al-Zati. So this is the difference. This is the only difference between Sahih al-Zati and Hasan al-Zati. What is the difference? Or which is the basic point? تمام الضبط التي كانت في الصحيح لذاته ولم تكن في محل الحسنة لذاته. It is the one that is included in صحيح لذاته, but you cannot get it there in الحسن لذاته. So الحسن لذاته should not, the narrator may not have complete repetitions. But in case of الصحيح لذاته is the one that the narrator is full of repetitions. So Allah musta'an. This is the basic different point between Hasan لذاته and Sahih لذاته. So one point that I would like to include is that if we say this hadith is Hasan, it doesn't mean that it is not authentic. No, it is authentic. As how you will react to the authentic narration, that's how you will react to the satisfactory narration. For example, like in terms of promotion, there are some of the qualities to review in terms of promoting something. Like for example, promotion in terms of examination, or in terms of position. There would be a kind of person with a satisfactory marks, and the one that his marks are excellent, for example. So both of them can be promoted. So this is how to react to authentic narration and satisfactory narration. Suppose I listen to a particular story or headline and I review the person who reported that, and I see the first person is a kind of competent person and he is full of reputation. I look into his occupations, because we know, as I discussed previously, there are basically 5 factors or 4 factors that are to be considered in terms of evaluating a narrator. One is kathrati riwaya, much narration, meaning that he is into that kind of occupation, into that kind of work, into that kind of job for many years. He has experience, for example. So in terms of hadith, if we said kathrati riwaya, like for example, a sahabi has a lot of riwaya, like Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, like Aisha radiallahu anha, Abdullah ibn Umar, Jabir bin Abdullah, Anas bin Malik, all these personalities are the kind of Sahaba that they had a lot of riwayah. Roughly, according to the estimation, the hadiths which have been narrated from Abu Hurairah, all the hadiths that were recorded from the narration of Abu Hurairah, which are authentic, they are around 6,646 or 64 authentic hadith. There are some of the differences of opinion in the estimation, but he narrated more than 6,600 authentic hadith, authentic narration. The person with this kind of magnitude, his narration would be considered, because he is a kind of person that has the experience. He is competent enough to be, that is to be regarded as a person with narrations. So kathrati riwaya, experience can be considered in terms of evaluating a report. If a kind of incident is narrated, maybe from a particular news channel, for example, you have to look who narrated that incident. That journalist or that reporter, was he an experienced person? Was he a high person with great experience? If he has the experience, maybe he was into the job for many years, so you can consider him that he is competent enough to narrate that kind of incident. But suppose that story or that headline or that news came from a person that he has lesser experience. So before you consider his narration, you have to evaluate other matters. For example, yes, he can be a satisfactory reporter, but there are other points to be included, to be considered. And one of the points is بحسب القرابة, how he is related to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If that Sahabi is not having much narration, so is he closer to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Was he alive during the time of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? So there is another point to be considered also. And nasab, his family type, his family relationship, his family background shall be also reviewed, for example. And also, بحسب البلدان, based on the cities, the town, where is he from, for example? Is he from Kufa or Basra or Medina or Mecca, in terms of hadith, for example? So likewise, if a narrator narrated a report, maybe he is in another continent and he reported something from other continent. How can that be considered as a kind of authentic narration or satisfactory narration? Unless if there are other qualities, other marks to be reviewed or to be considered in taking that kind of report. Suppose, for example, something happened in the Arabian Peninsula, and someone from, like for example, a particular astronaut reported that. Maybe he's in the Mars planet and he says that something happened in so region on the earth. So we have to review. We will not just take his report unless we have to verify how did he come to know. How did he know that this is happening or this had happened? So these are some of the things to consider in terms of narration. So these are the basic differences between الحسن لذاته والصحيح لغيره والصحيح لذاته والحسن الحسن لذاته والصحيح لذاته. مثال قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Example of that is the saying of the Rasul صلى الله عليه وسلم مفتاح الصلاة الطهورة وتحريمها التكبيرة وتحليلها التسليم. Example of الحسن لذاته. The one that the narrator who reported that information is a kind of person who is competent but he has lesser reputations, and the narration is free from any conjecture and any religious defect. Is the example of the hadith narrated by Imam Muslim. And the hadith of Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned, Iftahu Salatu Taqwa. The key to the prayer is purity. Purity is a key to the prayer. وَتَحْرِيمُهَا التَّكْبِيرُ. And its initiation is takbir. وَتَحْلِيلُهَا التَّسْلِيمُ. And it unlocking or exit is takbir. So this is the basic matter of the hadith. The Rasulullah mentioned the key to the prayer is purity. Meaning if you have purity, then you have the key to prayer. You can perform the prayer. So how can you start the prayer? By making the takbir until ihram. That's the reason why the Rasulullah said وَتَحْرِيمُهَا التَّكْبِيرُ. And it's sacred. Its initiation, its beginning is takbir. وَتَحْلِيلِهَا التَّسْلِيمُ. And its exit, its finalization, its unlocking is at-taslim, saying the salah. So this kind of hadith is categorized as al-hasan لذاته. It is satisfactory. ومن مزايا الحسنة, part of the weighted of al-Hasan. The hadith, if the hadith is Hasan, so the weightage. Like for example, the kind of criteria of al-Hasan لذاته is that الضعيف وفي ميزان الحسنة ما وضع أبو داود. A criteria based on al-Hasan لذاته, like a kind of weighing portion, weighing category of the publications that are based upon الحسن لذاته ما وضع أبي داود المنفرد. It's a kind of narration whereby Abu Dawud al-Sijistani narrated alone. If Abu Dawud al-Sijistani narrated a hadith, a matn of hadith, or he has a riwayah him alone, so that is considered as al-Hasan لذاته, because his book entirely, according to the thorough evaluation, based on the random that is ruling on the book, it is under the weightage of al-Hasan لذاته. But indeed, you can find authentic hadith. You can find لغيره, لذاته in the hadith of Abi Dawud, in the that is Sunan Abi Dawud. But if it is a narration, the kind of hadith that he is the only one that is not with that kind of riwayah, so that riwayah would be considered as al-Hasan لذاته. So this is the basic issue here. And secondly, there is one theory which is referred to Abi Dawud, but he was not the person who said that. The theory is that وَمَا سَكَتَ عَنْهُ فَهُوَ صَحِيح. That whatsoever he keeps muted on it, he keeps silent on it, meaning it is authentic. Imam Abi Dawud never mentioned such statement. It's a kind of statement that some of the people are anointing that to Abi Dawud is satisfied. But that's not the case. It is not the case. It is based on their understanding. If you take Sunan Abi Dawud, suppose for example you take Sunan Abi Dawud, and if you see, you would see that many of the hadiths that are weak or that are flimsy narration. We are not talking about, if we say hadith is da'if, the hadith is weak or it's a kind of flimsy one, it doesn't mean the matn. It is ruled out as a weak or authentic or satisfactory based on the isnad, the chain of the transmission, based on the rijal, the reporters, the personality of the reporters, the identity of the reporters. That's how it is being categorized. It doesn't mean that the statement of the Rasulullah is the one that is weak or it is the one that is flimsy. So we should understand this kind of points. So when it is narrated in a kind of way that only Abu Dawud narrated that in his book, and he keep muted on that, it doesn't mean that it is to the level of authentic. It can be al-Hasan. Yes, indeed, if you open Sunan Abi Dawud, you see the hadiths, a lot of the hadiths that are having weaknesses in the isnad. Abu Dawud used to mention, so person is a weak, is da'if, or he don't have this narration, or the narration was from this person, or this person narrated that hadith. So he would highlight a kind of point that would show the weakness in the hadith. So it is left for you to observe, to verify further in order to classify whether it is authentic or not. Likewise, in the Muslim of Imam, there are hadiths that they are to the level of authenticity, and there are the ones that are to the level of al-Hasan, satisfactory ones. So Allah understand. So these are some of the issues. Saying that whatsoever he keep muted is authentic, no. But rather he already mentioned by his mouth in the beginning, in the previous, in the acknowledgement, that whatsoever that he mentioned, he narrated in his book. He has wrote in his book the one that is authentic, the one that is satisfactory, and also the one that is a weak narration. That's what he says. But saying that whatsoever he keep muted is authentic, no, he never mentioned that. It is just based on the understanding of the scholars or some of the researchers or some of the students of knowledge, that they realize that whatsoever he keep muted, you see that it is a kind of authentic. Authentic in the sense that it is either al-Hasan or Sahih. So being the hadith as al-Hasan satisfactory, it is also authentic. You can work with it. You can work by it as how you work by authentic one. So these are the basic differences in such. So he mentioned further, قال ابن الوضاح. Ibn al-Waddah mentioned that if Abi Dawud narrated a narration alone, so that is considered as al-Hasan لذاته. والحسن لغيره. Another class is al-Hasan لغيره, a satisfactory narration based on other narration. الضعيف إذا تعددت طرقه على وجه يجبر بعضها بعضا بحيث لا يكون فيها كذاب ولا متهم بالكذب. Is a kind of weak narration when the channels of it multiplies. على وجه, in a kind of way يجبر بعضها بعضا, of which one portion, subsegment of the portion, subsegment of the channel is supporting the other portion. بحيث لا يكون فيها كذاب ولا متهم بالكذب. In the sense that a liar will not be found in such narration, a person that was accused of lying. So these are the differences. If a kind of weak narration is found, looking further, you realize that there are other narrations, multiple narrations that came with the same text, with the same information. So if you look, the issue is that some of the other narrations are supporting the information reported in the other narration. So in such a way you consider that former narration as a kind of satisfactory one due to other narrations. So that's what he says. So in the sense that it is a kind of weak narration, but the way is the fat way of that narration multiplies. And in the chain of the transmission, in the isnad, there is no kazzab that is found within. A liar, a person who is a liar, or a person that was accused of lying is not found within. So you can consider that as a kind of satisfactory narration. If that reporter or journalist is not a liar, or he was never accused of lying, or infringement, or he was never accused of plagiarism, if he's a scholar or researcher, so you can consider his information as a satisfactory one. If there are other references and the citations that emphasize towards his work or the result that he portrays, for example, or what he mentioned or what he reported. So in this we will be able to understand the differences. Al-Hasan لذاته is the one that a competent person narrated, less of repetitions. It is free from conjecture and hideous defect. Whereby Al-Hasan لغيره, the one that is satisfactory due to other narration, is a kind of flimsy narration, a weak narration, which while looking further, you get to realize there are other narrations that came from other channels who supported that narration, whereby in that riwayah there is no any liar in that pathway, in the isnad, in the chain of the transmission, or a person that was accused of lying. Maybe you may have a kind of person that he is given the accreditation that he is saduqun lahu awham, is a kind of truthful person, lahu awham, but he has some of the fairy tales, he has some of the inconsistency or inconsistent, that is narrations. There is a point between lahu awham or rawa awham, or you can get a thiqa, but he was dependent by other nuqat. I think in the previous session I mentioned one of the statement of Imam Malik towards Muhammad ibn Ishaq. Muhammad ibn Ishaq ibn Yasar ibn Khiyar, he said, Dajjal bin Dajjal. Imam Malik considered him as a liar. Among the evil lies. So, but that statement is not approved because he was known, Muhammad ibn Ishaq was known by the pious predecessors and he has no accreditation. That is just a kind of view of Imam Malik on his, according to what come clear to him. And we know also Imam Malik, he depends some of the individuals in his time whereby they are competent people. So it is just his way of ijtihad. It is his way of, that is reviewing the narrators. So that is according to his personality. He criticizing. The kind of criticism can be reviewed, whether it is a total defamation or a kind of less defamation. If it is a lesser defamation, so that information or that knowledge that is within the narrator or within that reporter can be considered. So Allah Musta'an is one of the information that we should be able to, that is understand related to Al-Hassan Lughaire. Al-Hassan Lughaire is flimsy narration. It is a weak narration. But looking further, there are other pathways that the same information, the same message was narrated. Like for example today, if you go to the social media, you get to a particular social media handle by a particular person that is known of weakness. He has some of the problems. Maybe the information or the content he provides are evil content, for example, or problematic ones, for example. So when he reported a particular information or he posted something, before you react to that, you should tell us to verify. Before you consider his statement, you have to check on other, that is, other handlers, other social media handlers, or other reporters, before taking from that particular person. So that's how it is. You have to be reliable. You have to be dedicated in these issues. Otherwise, you will create problems in your community or to yourself even. So you should know the way to react to issues and the way to evaluate matters. So this is one of the statement of related to this. Let's proceed, inshallah. So there is one question here, but inshallah I will discuss the question afterwards, inshallah. He said, من مزار الحسنة ما رواه أبي داود منفردا به قالها ابن وضاح. That is the opinion of Ibn Wadah. And many classical scholars they went on such statement. If Abu Dawud narrated a single riwayah, meaning he is the only person with that riwayah. So that would be considered as Hasan لذاته. That is Hasan لذاته. And that is after verifying the isnad. It is not that Abu Dawud narrated, you just consider it as authentic. You have to see what the pious predecessors mentioned or their commentary on that hadith, for example. So that is it. والحسن لغيره الضعيف إذا تعددت طرقه على وجه يجبر بعضها بعضا بحيث لا يكون فيها كذاب ولا متهم بالكذب. It's a kind of narration whereby it is a kind of flimsy one, and if you look, there are other narrations that supported that. One portion of the other narration supported the other portion, and there is no liar in such narration, and there is no person who was accused of lying. So this is an example of الحسن لذاته. حديث عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه قال، يعني حديث عمر بن الخطاب الفاروق, may Allah be pleased with him, he says, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم The Prophet upon him was إذا مد يديه, when he pointed his hand, إذا مد يديه, when he, that is إذا مد يديه, when he drew his hands up, when he uplifted his hands في الدعاء, while making invocation, while supplicating, لم يردهما حتى يمسح بهما وجهه. He will not take the both hands back, he will not take them back until when he wiped his face with the hands. So this hadith, which is narrated by Umar radiallahu anhu, that the Rasulullah whenever he uplifted his hands while making supplications, while making that is invocation, he will not let his hands to go back to its normal position. He will not take his hand, his both hands down until after he squeezed his face, he wiped his face away. Like how you see some of the individuals whenever they are making dua, when they raise their hands, they make the supplication, then they wipe their face. So this is Al-Hassan Lizati, original. If you look towards the chain of the transmission, there is one of the chain of the transmission, the isnad, that was a flimsy one, not from the Ummah. Because there are many people who narrated that from Ummah. At least you will see around 3, that is isnad, which is linking to the record of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. أخرجه الترمذي وقال في بلوغ المرام. Imam Tirmidhi narrated. It was also mentioned in the book of Bulugh al-Maram that وله شواهد عند أبي داود وغيره. This hadith has other shawahid, other witness, other that is citations, other references in the Abi Dawud from Abi Dawud al-Sajistani وغيره, and other narrators beside him ومجموعها. And if you gather all the chapters, all the pathways, all the isnad, all the riwayah in such, يقضي بأنه حديث حسن. It can be ruled out as a kind of حديث حسن, a kind of satisfactory hadith, satisfactory narration. So this is one of the examples. وإنما سمي حسنا لغيره. The reason why it was named, it was called as Al-Hasan لغيره, a satisfactory one due to our narration, لأنه لو نظر إلى كل طريق بانفراد. Suppose if you are to look in each of the channels separately, لم يبلغ رتبة الحسن, it will not reach to the level of satisfaction. It will not be considered as a satisfactory one. If you evaluate each of the channels, each of the that is isnad. فلما نظر إلى مجموع طرقه, when it is observed, when you observe to the entire channels, the entire that is pathways, قوي حتى بلغ, you will see that it will get strengthened up to the extent that it reaches the level of satisfactory. So this is the issue. So, and there is the last segment of الضعيف. The hadith that is ضعيف, weak one. ما خلا عن شرط الصحيح والحسن, is the one that is separately, that is not having the conditions of authentic or satisfactory narration. So meaning it's a kind of narration whereby it was not narrated from a competent person, no reputation. There are conjectures and there are hideous defects in the narration. So that is ضعيف. ومن مزايا الضعيفة, the weightage, the weighing scale of ضعيف, part of the weighing scale of ضعيف, part of the categories of the flimsy ahadith, flimsy narrations. من فرض به الأخير, like the one, a kind of narration that Uqayl was the one that narrated such narration. أو ابن علي أو ابن علي أو خطيب البغدادي أو الخطيب, Imam Khatib. When he was the only person that narrated such riwayah, that riwayah will not be considered as a kind of satisfactory one. It can be just neglected. As some of the righteous predecessors or the ulama of hadith used to evaluate the hadith of al-Khatib. أو ابن عساكر أو ابن عساكر في تاريخه in his book التاريخ, أو الديلمي في مسند الفردوس, أو Imam Dailami in his book مسند الفردوس, أو الترمذي أو أبو عيسى الترمذي, أو الترمذي الحكيم أو الترمذي الحكيم, not أبي عيسى الترمذي. We know there are differences. There is At-Tirmidhi al-Hakim, and there is Abu Isa at-Tirmidhi. Abu Isa at-Tirmidhi is the author of Sunan Tirmidhi. So also At-Tirmidhi al-Hakim في نوادر الأصول, in his popular book نوادر الأصول, if he narrated a riwayah alone, you did not find the riwayah in other publications, in other books of hadith, you find the riwayah not. So that riwayah will be considered as a kind of weak one. وهو غير صاحب السنن. Al-Hakim, Hakim al-Tirmidhi, he was not the author of Sunan Tirmidhi. أو الحاكم, أو الحاكم النسابوري وابن جارود في تاريخيهما, in their two books of التاريخ للحاكم والتاريخ لابن جارود. But if it is in مستدرك على الصحيحين, that is considered as a kind of satisfactory or authentic narration. But if it is found in his book of Tarikh, for example, like the book of Imam Bukhari has Sahih Bukhari, he has Kitab al-Tarikh, and he has Adab al-Mufrad. You will see some of the hadiths that are to the level of Al-Hasan Adab al-Mufrad. They are not to the level of authentic. Although, as I mentioned earlier, Al-Hasan is also considered as authentic, as how you would react to authentic hadiths, as Sahih, as how you would react to Al-Hasan or Al-Hasan لغيره. Allah musta'an. It's just based on the classification for you to know how to establish a rule or how to work by such narration. So also, أو الحاكم وابن جارود في تاريخيه. So due to the time limitation, we are going to stop here. We are going to proceed وتفيد أخبار الآحاد سوى الضعيف. What are the learning significant learning outcomes that we can obtain from the univoc narration, the narration that is not valid, beside the da'if. So what can you understand between, what can you extract, what are the benefits you will be able to extract from الحسن لذاته, الحسن لغيره, سيد لذاته, سيد لغيره, as subclasses of al-ahad. So this is our basic discussion. We discussed about al-Hasan لذاته and al-Hasan لغيره. So as I give this kind of examples, or as how Sheikh Usaymin mentioned, in the book of Mustalah al-Hadith, he mentioned about the issues of Ibn Ali, al-Khatib, al-Hakim, al-Daylami, Ibn Jarud, for example, and also Abi Dawud. These are the Rijal, for example. These are men, people of legacy. So based on this kind of example, during your lifetime also, you can evaluate people in such a way. Otherwise, things will become complicated for you. You should know how to react to news or information. Otherwise, things will become complicated for you. You should know this particular news channel, or this particular broadcaster, or this particular person. These are the information he provides. Like this information that I'm providing now is totally encrypted. When it is religiously encrypted, it is related to devotion. Although there are some of the benefits that you can have of other issues. So likewise, if I'm discussing in other aspects, for example, so the information that I'm talking about is in such kind of aspect, for example. So likewise, you should know, otherwise you will misunderstood issues. Or you will make a kind of judgment that will become a kind of disaster onto yourself, or to your community, or to your society. So, and as I mentioned, the last point that I would like to highlight here, if a person mentions a kind of evil utterance, or he says evil statements, if you want to criticize such person, you should not condemn his entire society, or for example his entire country, or his entire nation. Otherwise, you would do a kind of evil, similar to the evil, or more than the evil that such person had done, whom uttered an evil statement that made you to criticize him in such a way. Because لا تزال طائفة من أمتي ظاهرين على الحق منصورين لا يضرهم من خذلهم ولا من خالفهم وهم على ذلك حتى يأتي أمر الله. Wherever you go, you will see good individuals, competent individuals, people with good qualifications. Wherever you go, you cannot just condemn that entire society. There are good ones, there are evil ones. So you should know, you should verify before taking decision or making judgment. So likewise in the field of hadith, you have to verify. You have to verify, you have to classify, you have to know the taxonomy, the terminologies. You cannot just take a terminology or terminology of hadith to use in fiqh or to utilize the terminology of fiqh in hadith. Like I talked in the first session about the meaning of sunnah. For example, if you got it in the field of fiqh, it's totally different kind of discussion, it's different terminology. So likewise in different fields, there are different terminology. Like for example,